Hey everyone, I'm Armor Gaming. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is RaZhul. The time for a goodbye has come. Your soul is ready. Embrace your destiny. You are dead already. After today, you'll be just a skull. Accept your fate. Come to RaZhul. RaZhul is the newest dark monster, and I gotta say, his design is one of my most favorite monster designs. Especially his teen form. When I first saw this monster, I thought his teen form was the adult form, and I honestly prefer this one a lot more than I prefer this one. I mean, just comparing them side by side, this one looks a lot more menacing. But anyways, we're not here to talk about the monster's design, although it is amazing. We're here to talk about his stats and his skills, so let's get into it. RaZhul has a power of 3,531, which is one of the highest powers in the whole entire game, and in fact, just talking about dark legendary monsters, this makes him tied for second place with monsters like Erebus and Palax. The only dark legendary monster that has a higher power than RaZhul is General Nishant with a power of 3,542. So RaZhul is already starting things off with pretty impressive stats. Moving on, he has a life of 28,350. Now, unlike his impressive power, his life is rather mediocre. As of the time recording this video, there are 30 dark legendary monsters, and a power of 28,350 puts him in 14th place. So it's not good, it's not bad, it's mediocre. And then we have his speed, 3,355. Unfortunately for RaZhul, this is one of the worst speeds for dark legendary monsters. In fact, this puts him in 25th place, meaning he's only faster than 5 other dark legendary monsters. Not a good speed stat to have. However, you can argue whether that matters or doesn't matter because this monster is an attacker, and one thing we know about attackers is that their speed stat is rather irrelevant because you typically pair them up with the deny monster, and it's up to that deny monster to prevent the enemy from attacking you, to prevent them from getting a turn, so that your attacker can get a turn and wipe them out. So although he is rather slow, he's not necessarily too slow. He's not slow like the Ringer with 28,000. So when we consider the fact that he's an attacker, I would say overall his stats are pretty good. And then we have his trait, Immune to Possession. Gives immunity to any kind of possession, which is an amazing trait to have, especially for dark monsters, and it's also amazing for when you're going up against magic monsters. Now, tying together this monster's speed and his trait, it's great that he has immune to possession. If you would have had something like immune to nightmares, I would have been a little more harsh on RaZhul, but because he has immune to possession, this does give him a little upper hand against monsters like Lily, against monsters like Mommy, any dark monster that has a possession skill. However, it's also important to note that lots of dark deny monsters also have other means of immobilizing. Mommy and Will Razorface have stun skills. Krampus, the king of dark deny monsters, has free skills, so you gotta be careful when choosing your opponents. But now let's jump into his default and special skills. We start off with the Broadsword Strike. Deals low physical damage to a single enemy with 25 damage, costing 13 stamina and having no cooldown. Soul Slash deals low dark damage to a single enemy, dealing 30 damage, costing 13 stamina with a no cooldown. Nothing impressive about his default skills, so let's move to his special. The Underworld Rises deals life from all targets, may give nightmares to all targets. It's an AoE, meaning it attacks multiple enemy monsters with 60 damage, and the best part of this is that it steals life from all targets. So not only is RaZhul dealing out major damage, he's also going to recover his life. With this monster's base power stat and this skill's damage, I'm pretty sure just about any time you use his special skill, you're going to recover your life all the way to max. And not only that, just in case any of the enemy monsters live, they're also going to have nightmares, which is just icing on the cake. And another note on his final skill, keep in mind it is dark damage, it's not special damage, so when you're going up against dark monsters, this skill probably won't be enough to take them out. If you're going up against earth monsters, this skill is amazing because earth monsters tend to be really tanky, so you're going to be dealing extra damage on them, which means you're going to be recovering more life. So overall, an amazing special skill. But now let's move on to Skills Group 1. In Skills Group 1, we have a skill called Ghastly Wound. Deals moderate special damage, applies stamina leak to target, requires cooldown. It targets a single enemy, dealing 35 damage, costing 28 stamina with a 1-turn cooldown. And I have nothing bad to say about this skill. Stamina leak is nice, the damage output considering it's a Skills Group 1 skill is nice, but of course when we move on to Skills Group 2 and Skills Group 3, he's going to have a lot better skills, so there's no reason to run Ghastly Wound. So then we move on to Mind Reaver. Deals moderate dark damage, 50% chance of giving nightmares to target. It attacks a single enemy with 35 damage, costing 26 stamina, having no cooldown. So you guys have heard me say this before, 50% chance of doing anything, unless it's an AoE. I'm not a fan of it, so don't even consider running the skill. You can completely disregard Mind Reaver. And last on Skills Group 1, we have Darkness Within. Steals life from target, gains 20% stamina, requires cooldown. It attacks a single enemy with 20 damage, costing 28 stamina with a 2-turn cooldown. So it's a lifesteal 50% and it recovers your stamina by 20%. Now I am going to talk a little about the skill. I've been trying to convince myself that it may be worth running the skill, but I can't. A little spoiler alert, although I imagine many of you already know this, Later on, this monster has a skill that gives him triple damage and an extra turn. So I was thinking, if you use that skill and then use Darkness Within, although it's only 20 damage, because you have a high base power, because you have strength runes, and because you have triple damage, Darkness Within, although it may not kill a monster with full life in one hit, it might be able to kill a monster that's already damaged. And the best part of that is that you recover your life, and you recover some stamina. Now another spoiler alert, this monster is kind of like Barbatos in that he has skills that drain his life, so I told myself, hey, triple damage, nice base power, strength runes, and you get a lifesteal, so it's a way for him to heal himself. However, in the end, the damage output is way too low, so I don't think this skill is worth running, although I would have really liked to see more lifesteal skills. No other skill in Skills Group 2 or Skills Group 3 does lifesteal, which I would have really liked to see more of, especially considering the fact that he drains lots of life from himself and from his teammates, but at the same time, lifesteal isn't really needed, just because this monster is so powerful that when he attacks, he can basically just win you the game. So unfortunately, we don't need anything from Skills Group 1. So that moves us down to Skills Group 2. In Skills Group 2, we have an attack called Cursed Blade. Deals moderate special damage, applies 2 random negative effects to target, requires cooldown. So you target a single enemy, dealing 40 damage, costing 31 stamina with a 2-turn cooldown. I'm going to scroll down really quickly so you can see all the different negative effects you can actually land, and I really do like this skill. However, I don't know how usable it actually is. I already mentioned that RaZhul is going to be an attacker, so 40 damage, that isn't really what you want to see in an attacker. The best thing about this skill is that it gives 2 random negative effects. However, because RaZhul has such a strong base power, you can imagine that most of the attacks you dish out, you want to be able to finish off the enemy in one hit. So for that reason, you don't really need Cursed Blade. If the enemy happens to live, it is nice to give them negative effects. Maybe you can land a stun, a freeze, maybe you can drain their stamina. It is nice to be able to immobilize them just in case you can't finish them off in one hit. Best part about this skill is that it is special based, meaning in Team Wars when you're going up against another dark monster, this skill can potentially come in handy. I'm gonna leave it up to you guys whether or not it's worth it to run Cursed Blade, but let me move on to the other skills. Next we have Souls Arise. Deals low dark damage to all enemies, may give nightmares to all targets, requires cooldown. It's an AoE, meaning it attacks multiple enemies, dealing 30 damage, costing 35 stamina with a 3-turn cooldown. So from Skills Group 2 and 3, this is RaZhul's only AoE, and you definitely want to run this skill. It's going to be an amazing skill, especially considering you have triple damage. Now, although I'm not the biggest fan of nightmares, over the course of 3 turns, it will take away 15% of life from the enemy monster, and it deals an additional 10% stamina drain, which, draining 14 stamina from the average legendary monster, it can come in handy. Now, I normally don't do this, but I am going to compare this monster with Barbatos. Barbatos has a skill called Hellfire that deals moderate special damage to all enemies and may burn all targets. The first difference we see is that Souls Arise is dark based, whereas Hellfire is special based. The second difference we see is that Soul Rise deals 30 damage, whereas Barbatos Hellfire deals 35 damage. And the final difference is that Souls Arise gives nightmares, whereas Barbatos Hellfire gives burning. And burning over the course of 3 turns takes away 45% of the enemy's base life. So comparing RaZhul and Barbatos, I would say Barbatos Hellfire is the superior skill. The fact that Hellfire deals special damage is perfect for Team Wars. Whereas with the RaZhul, using Souls Arise, you most likely won't be taking out the enemy dark monster. Barbatos does have the potential to take out even the enemy dark monster. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Let's move forward with the analysis on RaZhul. We have a skill called Dark Sacrifice. Removes 25% of life from ally and gives double damage and precision. Requires cooldown. So it targets one of your allies, it deals no damage, it costs 31 stamina and has a 1-turn cooldown. So with this skill, you're going to be taking away 25% of their life, you're going to give them increased accuracy and double damage. Except it's only for 1 turn. So this is more of a supportive skill, which I really don't think RaZhul needs. Now one thing that's unclear to me is that if this 25% of the life is from the monster's total life or is it from the monster's current life. When we look at Barbatos, it's really clear in the description what it is. It says right here 30% of Barbatos' maximum life, and when we look at blood, it says this skill drains 20% of Barbatos' current life. But for RaZhul, it just says 25% of life from the ally, which I'm going to interpret from being from their maximum life. So for example, if a monster had 1000 life and you use this skill, they're going to lose 250 life regardless of what their current life is, even if they've been attacked, even if they only had 500 life. That's my interpretation of it, but if you guys disagree, let me know in the comments below. But regardless of what it is, whether it's current life or maximum life, I don't think this skill is worth running. And now moving on to Skills Group 3. We have a skill called Ethereal Gas. Deals heavy special damage, may possess target, requires cooldown. It targets a single enemy, dealing 50 damage, costing 28 stamina with a 2-turn cooldown. And this is a pretty good skill, but it also puts RaZhul in a really interesting position. The fact that this skill possesses makes it more so that this monster can be more than just an attacker. He can be kind of a hybrid. Overall, I think RaZhul will be better as an attacker, but because he can possess, it makes it so that you don't want to take out the enemy monsters in one hit. it makes it so that you want to possess the enemy monster so that they can attack their own team. Now I think one of the best things about Ethereal Gas is that it is special based, so if you're using RaZhul in Team Wars, you can take over the enemy dark monster, and hopefully that enemy dark monster can attack their own teammates and either possess them, confuse them, stun them, do some kind of immobilizing skill, or do some kind of strong offensive skill and finish them off. So Ethereal Gas, it's a good skill. However, you may or may not want to run this skill. It's going to be up to you. So let me talk about the final two skills, and then we'll talk about different skill sets. We have a skill called Strength from the Weak. Removes 25% of life from all allies, gives them double damage to target, may possess target, requires cooldown. So first, there's some confusion in the wording. It removes 25% of all of your allies, so all 3 of your teammates, they're going to lose 25% of your life. This should say gives double damage to the target. So with Strength from the Weak, you're picking one enemy monster, okay? So say for example, you have RaZhul on your side, you have Barbatos on the enemy side, you use Strength from the Weak, all of your monsters lose 25% of their life, and you're gonna give Barbatos double damage, and then you're also gonna be possessing Barbatos. I know the description is a little confusing, but that's my interpretation of how I think it should read. You can kind of think of it as Glitch's Corrupt skill, which is ultimately fantastic. You're taking over the enemy monster, and you're giving them a buff so that you can take out the enemy team. It's a great move. However, I said this with Ethereal Gas. It puts RaZhul in a really interesting position where he can really be more of a hybrid. If you see here, this skill deals no damage. So if you're running Strength runes on this monster and you're using a skill like Strength from the Weak, you're not dishing out any damage and you're just using the enemy's monster against them, which really just renders the Strength runes useless. You might begin to wonder why not choose run Ethereal Gas, Strength from the Weak if you're possessing the enemy monsters. That's not an attacker, that's more of a supportive, secondary deny monster, whatever you want to call it. Which is why I've been saying throughout this analysis, it's really going to be up to you whether or not you want to run a certain skill. Now to discuss the final skill, which is an amazing skill. Soul Offering. Removes 50% of life from all allies, gains 1 extra turn, gains triple damage. I am going to highlight that. So first of all, you remove 50% of life from all allies, which is a huge amount of life. Not only that, you gain 1 extra turn, and lastly, you gain triple damage, which is absolutely insane. So this is a self buff skill, and I think if you would have been able to target any ally as opposed to a self buff skill, this monster would have been an incredible support monster because of all his possession skills. Because of this skill, you could have put 3 speed runes, 3 team speed runes, and he would have been an amazing buffer. But because he has such an amazing power and he has this skill that gives him triple damage and an extra turn, he is in the running to be the best dark attacker. So currently, as you all know, this handsome little guy right here, Barbatos, is the king of dark attackers. But I think RaZhul has the potential to take that spot away from Barbatos. And if you haven't seen my Barbatos analysis, you can click the little picture here, you can listen to that analysis, you can listen to this analysis, and then you can decide for yourself who is better. But really quickly, one of the skills that makes Barbatos so great is his Blood Covenant skill. And that's because this skill gives him double damage and because it gives him an extra turn. The energy regeneration is icing on the cake. He can never run out of stamina, and he has a 0 cooldown skill that gives 90 damage, but really it's that extra turn and double damage that makes him a top tier attacker. Now, although RaZhul doesn't have any 90 damage single skill hit, in fact he doesn't even have any skill that deals at least 60 damage, he does have this skill that gives him triple damage. And also, let's go back up to compare his base power. His base power is 3,531. You compare that to Barbatos, 3,476. RaZhul has a 55 point power advantage. And again, during analysis, I don't really compare 2 monsters, but I think in this case, it really is fair to compare RaZhul and Barbatos, and I actually want to hear your guys' opinion. Who do you think is the best attacker? Is it RaZhul or is it Barbatos? Again, you can listen to both of my analysis, you can read different comments, you can discuss it with people, but ultimately I want to see what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below, who do you think is the best attacker? Does Barbatos still hold the #1 spot, or does RaZhul take it from him? But anyways, now let's discuss potential skill sets on this monster. There are 2 skills I think you absolutely need. The first of which is Soul Off, triple damage, extra turn, pretty straightforward. The second skill you need is Soul's Arise, and that's because it's your AoE skill. Most of the games, you're just going to be doing Soul Offering, Soul's Arise, and that's pretty much going to win you the game. And I don't think too much analysis or explanation is needed. You give yourself an extra turn, you give yourself triple damage, and then you finish off the monster with a 30 damage AoE. And if they happen to live, they're going to get Nightmares. Although Nightmares might not kill them, it is going to severely weaken all of the enemy monsters. The only downside to this is that this skill again is dark based and not special based, so chances are the enemy dark monster is going to be surviving. So you have to be prepared to immobilize the enemy dark monster. So now that just leaves the question of what other skills you should choose. And you have a choice between Cursed Blade, Ethereal Gas, or Strength from the Weak. Now normally this wouldn't be a hard choice, but because this monster is going to be running at least 2 strength runes, it really makes you wonder what is worth using and what isn't worth using. For example, Strength from the Weak, it's a great skill because it possesses, it gives the enemy monster double damage, but you're removing 25% of life from all allies. Now again, I don't know if this is current life or if it's overall life. If it's overall life, it's kind of risky, especially considering you already use Soul Offering. So Soul Offering is 50%, Strengthen the Weak, that's 25%, that's a total of 75%, meaning if your allies took any amount of damage, that might actually end up killing them. If it's current life, you really don't need to worry about that. Now, if you end up running Strengthen the Weak, you gotta ask yourself, is it really worth it for all of your allies to take away 25% of their life for the enemy monster just to get double damage and attack themselves? I've personally concluded that the answer is no, because RaZhul is gonna be running Strength runes, which means you can just use Ethereal Gas or Cursed Blade to finish off your enemy. You don't really need to rely on the enemy to finish themselves off, especially if you already did the Soul Offering Souls Arise combo. I really don't think you need to get the enemy monster on your side. They're going to be damaged enough to where you can finish them off with either Cursed Blade or Ethereal Gas. However, I'm sure some of you will disagree with me, which is why I left the skill up on the table for you to choose. You don't need to agree with me on my analysis, I'm just offering my insight on the game. The last thing I want to note on this skill is that it gives possession, which keep in mind, lots of dark monsters are immune to possession. If it happens to be dark and magic, lots of magic monsters are also immune to possession. So do you really want a skill that takes away 25% of life from all of your allies and it possesses a target which the enemy monsters may be immune to? Again, for me personally, that's not a good trade-off, especially because I have strength runes, and using a skill that deals no damage, I'm not utilizing those strength runes. So then we have Ethereal Gas. This skill deals 50 damage and it can possess a target, which in my opinion is better. There's no having to pay life from all of my allies. It deals 50 damage, meaning my strength runes won't go to waste, and if the enemy for some reason is still alive, they will be possessed. And again, if it's dark or magic, chances are they'll have immunity to possession, but again, if I'm using Ethereal Gas after doing the Soul Offering Souls Arise combo, chances are they won't be alive after I use this skill. Another great thing about running Ethereal Gas is that it may be more beneficial for me to use Soul Offering and Ethereal Gas to take out the enemy dark monster, as opposed to me doing the Soul Offering Souls Arise combo. So it gives you a little more flexibility, and for that reason I do like Ethereal Gas more. And then we have Cursed Blade, which it deals a little less damage than Ethereal Gas, but it gives 2 random negative effects. And you never know, 1 or 2 negative effects could really mean the difference between winning or losing in a game. If you're not strong enough to take out the enemy monster, and they happen to be immune to possession, you might be able to land a stun or freeze, you may be able to drain all their stamina, you may be able to land burning, and maybe they only had like 10% of their life left. There are so many different possibilities where Cursed Blade can come in handy. So if anything, I would say don't run all of Skills Group 3, run Soul Offering, run Souls Arise, and then run either Ethereal Gas or Strengthen the Weak, and run Cursed Blade. But for me, the best skill set is Soul Offering, Ethereal Gas, Souls Arise, and Cursed Blade. And I want to end by saying this is definitely one of the best dark attackers in the game, actually one of the best attackers overall. And again, I want to pose the question to you guys. Do you think he's a contender to take the top spot for dark legendary monsters? Do you think this monster is better than Barbatos? Why or why not? Make sure to leave your response in the comments below. I want to hear what everyone has to say. I can't wait to use this monster. I hope everyone gets a chance to get him. And I want to thank everyone who made it to the end of the analysis. Thank you guys so much for supporting me and my channel. I hope you all have an amazing day. Make sure to also comment below who you want me to analyze next. And with that being said, remember to dream big and pursue your passions.